crazy.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Oscar Buzz. Trevor here, joined by Thomas, as always, and we are talking about May and December, the new Todd Haynes film. Massive fan of Todd Haynes. I saw this at the Chicago International Film Festival. You saw it at the London Film Festival. And let's get into it because this is a wild film. We got Natalie Portman doing crazy shit. Julianne Moore, Charles Melton, all great performances across the board. It's hard. Very interesting film to talk about. I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, I mean, I'll start off by saying this is easily one of my favorite films of
Yeah.
the year. Easily one of my favorite films of the festival. I completely agree. I think all three of the performances are in top form and perfectly balanced as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like you've got Julianne Moore. They're all on their own wavelengths. But their wavelengths are all perfectly sort of intertwined.
They complement each other well, for sure.
Exactly. Like, you wouldn't expect necessarily all of these three performances in a vacuum to work in a film together, but they really, really do. I think everyone is on top form. I think Natalie Portman, the stuff she is doing in her slow transformation to become more and more like Julianne Moore, is very complex. It's quite subtle, and you don't notice it because it's covered in so many layers of just campy comedy and perfect line delivery that you don't notice it, and it slowly creeps up on you, which is great.
I have to cut in. She has a line delivery where I cannot get it out of my head, and I'm not going to do it justice, but she's an actress, and somebody's like, "Oh, I loved you in this movie," and she takes a massive breath, and she's like, "Thank you so much." And just the way that she emphasizes the vowels, and it's so breathy and airy, I don't know, like, just her line deliveries in this film are like on a point. It's incredible.
Yeah, and I think what's impressive about Charles Melton is the fact that his performance remains very consistent throughout, but it's the way more context is added to the character that make his performance, what at the start is like quite darkly comedic, like, oh, this is awkward, this is a bit of a weird situation, and it just gets slowly darker and darker and more emotional as the layers are stripped back. But the performance remains consistent throughout. You don't see
really
much
impressive.
Necessarily visceral transformation. It's all just done, and it's done very subtly. And for a film that is very over top, very garish, very deliberate, very bold,
and
such a restrained performance almost complements the idea of him feeling out of place in this world, because he kind of feels out of place in this film, but in like the best way possible would be the way I'd describe it.
Yeah, and I think without going too much into spoilers, like the idea of transformation throughout the film, I think is really interesting because there's a lot of beginning and ends, because you have like Julianne Moore and Charles Melton's characters. They got together when Julianne Moore was a whole ass adult and Charles Melton was in 7th grade, and it's quite funny how they deliver that information. Kind of terrifying to think about. But it's really like their kids are graduating, and Charles Melton's kind of like at this weird midlife crisis moment that I would say most people hit as their kids are graduating when they're like in their 50s, but he's in like his early 30s. And it's this really weird moment for him where he feels like he is almost turned into a person that he's not, and he's like completely putting out this identity that is wholly not him. And you obviously have Natalie Portman transforming into, something that she's not, becoming Julianne Moore, and you have like the butterflies. I mean, it's the first thing that you see in the film is caterpillars, chrysalis turning into butterfly, right? And without spoilers, that becomes a thing throughout the film. So it's, for all of the campy comedy, Todd Haynes is working on a really interesting thematic level here with how he really quietly, in a film that isn't like, there isn't too much visual flair to it or anything with that.
No, there are some great framing choices.
There's some fantastic framing, but it just isn't like what you conventionally think of as far as like, auteur thematic visual flair.
Yeah.
But he places some really interesting thematic elements throughout that actually work together quite well. I mean, even without spoilers, like a snake is used towards the end of the film, which famously snakes shed their skin, become something else, right? Like, I think that there is a lot of really interesting stuff at play that I think Todd Haynes executes really masterfully under the guise of some ridiculously like incredible camp.
Yeah, I mean, also the comedy, as you were saying, like it goes deeper than that, but the comedy also on just on the surface is
It's
very
so
well done
funny.
and it's very well told. But also, I think a lot of the thematic stuff comes through because the film is very unjudgmental. Like it does a great job of placing you in the Natalie Portman role, where you're
Yeah,
observing what's going on, and you start to sort of mirror her beliefs towards this relationship as the film progresses. You're sort of like, don't know how comfortable I am. Like at the start, maybe it seemed like kind of loving, but now I'm a bit questioning it. And then, without spoilers, something happens and it's all reframed. Like it's constantly
yeah.
reframing your expectations and what you're expecting
It's
and
kind of like
the
shifting the
conclusions that you're
goalposts.
drawing.
Right.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. The conclusions you were drawing from the film are constantly shifting, but they're never enforced on you. These are conclusions that
Yeah.
you're drawing. Like it really does encourage a lot of action from the spectator, which I think is
Yeah.
great. It makes for a very fulfilling experience. Like it's not judgy,
It's
but
like
there
a
are judgments to be
mystery
made.
almost like it's like a mystery where you already know the answer. Like you know this
Yeah,
is a bad thing. Like this is a crime, but
yeah,
you're still kind of investigating these people and it's kind of the people who did the crime and their perspective on their own crime and how
yeah.
they each see like as far as like who is the victim, who is the aggressor, all of these types of things and you know how they perceive what they did. And I think like Natalie Portman as someone who's investigating but also becoming these people plays a really interesting role in that like almost like mystery like detective role.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I love also a lot of the stylistic elements with like the close zooms and like the score shifts and
Oh my
whatever.
god, the
It's
score
like a TV film almost
from
where you like expect to cut to an ad break or something. I think those are great.
the first, I don't think it's that much of a spoiler to say.
No,
In
I
the
think
it's in like
most.
the first 5 minutes, and Julianne Moore, they're preparing for a party. She opens the fridge, and the camera just does this like really like slow zoom that just like it takes a while. It's like 15 seconds zooming in on her face as this like really dramatic score is just like you know like building and building and building, and we arrive at her face, and she just like stares into the fridge and goes, I don't think we have enough hot dogs, and it cuts. And at that moment, I was like, okay, we're in.
Yeah,
Todd Haynes is back. He's doing his camp stuff because like his last couple of films, I mean, like with like Dark Waters and then like Carol and stuff, like it was a bit more conventional and a bit more like just very. No, I don't want to say standard dramas because I think Carol is absolutely phenomenal,
yeah,
but just like. I don't know. They're just like really well told dramas, and I'm so happy for him to get back to his campy self,
yeah. Whilst also
because
taking those elements of drama
yeah,
that
it really
that
feels like a I
yeah,
don't know. It feels like a massive piece as part of his career. I think we like it's interesting how a lot of directors this year it really feels they're kind of doing their magnum opus and doing like and not that a magnum opus has to be like an end, but just like a
yeah,
project that really feels like it's drawing on so much of their previous work to make like the biggest thing they've done. I mean, we say this with Scorsese and with Nolan, and I mean like even like Gerwig went really big this year. Like, and there are others I'm forgetting. I mean, Anderson with Astrid City did some really interesting stuff where he's like examining his own style. And it kind of almost feels like Haynes is in a similar
yeah.
place.
I mean, it may be due to like a post-COVID type of thing where like we saw a lot of people, a lot of creative people take the time to step back, and we're now seeing the
Examine their
rewards from
work.
that kind of
Yeah, I
stuff
think
because
that
we're
is a
seeing
lot of it.
it's a bit. I wouldn't necessarily go magnum opus. I agree. I'd go more a sort of reflective film. Each
Yes,
director
yeah.
is putting
Magnum
out a
opus
very
isn't the right word, but yeah.
reflective film on their career. And this is a film, like I'll say as well, I think the most impressive thing about this film is the way every single element of what it is trying to do marries together. Like
Yeah.
the score, marries the editing, marries the visual style, marries the performances, marries the dialogue that they're speaking. All of it comes together to just create a very distinct tone for the film, which I think
Yeah,
is just very impressive and it's something
it's
you
like
don't often see.
you have those things in music like a that's what I call this band
Yeah,
song or whatever like that. Like this is a that's what I call Todd Haynes movie.
yeah,
Like it's really it's doing all of the Todd Haynes things, and also a lot of the reflection on acting. And I think like
yeah,
Natalie Portman in particular, is a really interesting kind of focal point for the story, and where her character ends up. It's quite funny, but also kind of sad. And there's a lot of you never know entirely how to feel about all these characters. I guess it's you constantly have conflicting emotions, and as you say, Todd Haynes never really tells you how to feel about these characters, which I think is a really interesting place to kind of frame a story which in a more traditional sense would have such strong moral boundaries and gray areas, and he does all of this kind of ambiguity in a way that doesn't feel like he's trying to justify in any way. He's analyzing without justifying, which I
For
think is
sure.
like a really fine line to ride.
For sure. For sure. No, his work I think is very, very impressive in this
For
film.
sure. Do we want to go with ratings?
Yeah, I mean, I'd be pushing a 10, but I'd probably go a 9. I just think the one thing, I think the plot is a bit jumpy in parts. I think it does just kind of go, oh, now we're doing this, now we're doing it. It does rush through a lot of elements where I
Yeah.
think it could have maybe taken time to step back and breathe. That'd be my really only flaw of it that just kept it from being. But it's pushing 10. It is pushing 10,
Yeah.
but I'll land on
I'm
a 9, I think.
I'm at a very strong 8. We somehow live in a world where you liked the campy Todd Haynes movie more than I did, and I somehow liked the Scorsese and Nolan historical epics more than you
Yeah,
did.
yeah.
If you haven't been watching the channel for that long, that's insane. That's not supposed to happen with how our taste usually works. But no, I mean, I obviously still really love this film. It's an 8 pushing a 9. I wanted for all the praise we're giving Todd Haynes, like just as far as like I think he accomplishes everything he wants to do within this film. I just even wanted more. Like I wanted more ridiculous. I wanted more flair. I wanted more, which is just kind of a personal thing. And I
Yeah.
agree. I think some of the narrative and the way that it's constructed doesn't entirely piece together, and I think it almost relies a bit on the performances, which you can obviously do. But I think stepping back, there isn't that much to necessarily dissect within
Maybe.
the storytelling and the framing, and more so in like kind of like the thematic work is drawn from the performances in a way.
Yeah.
The way that I'm saying this doesn't sound like it's a bad thing, but ratings are vibes based and
Yeah.
arbitrary, so whatever.
Yeah.
um, but yeah, no. Should we get into awards?
Yes, of course.
Okay. I feel confident about screenplay.
Hopefully, it is the type of thing that maybe could slip if
This could get nothing.
this could get nothing. Exactly. That is my worry.
There's
Yeah, there's
also
also.
a world though where this can get like screenplay. This can get Melton. I mean, one of the ladies could get in.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think actress is just fundamentally too
Natalie
similar
probably
to
not.
Natalie
Yeah,
Portman, and it would be very weird to. I think Julianne Moore is the least likely to get nominated. It'd be kind of weird to go for, even though she's very good, very
she's very
worthy.
good.
It'd be a bit weird. I weirdly come around on this film. At first, I thought when this film sort of premiered at Cannes or whatever, I thought, yeah, this can get screenplay, this can get Natalie Portman, Julianne Moore, maybe even picture,
Picture.
and not Charles Melton. Now I'm thinking most likely thing that happens is maybe
Lone.
screenplay or only Charles Melton in a sort of Brian Tyree Henry type
There's
nomination,
a
which
stat
is very
of
strange.
and Jack, who's been on this channel a couple times before, Oscar Film Forecast, he's brought this to our attention plenty of time. And it's that very consistently there is a supporting performance in either supporting actor or supporting actress that is in a film that is not in Best Picture. And it is like the lone nomination for this film. This happens a lot. Last year we had Brian Tyree Henry. I mean, this happens pretty regularly. I'm not going to go back and give all the examples. Charles Melton can make a lot of sense. As we say, he's doing a lot. I think the concern is that he is obviously the least known name of this, so they would have to campaign him. I do think that if they campaign him correctly, it can definitely happen. Supporting actors, it's an interesting race because you have Triple R with Ryan Gosling,
Yeah,
Robert Downey Jr. and Robert De Niro, and then you also have Ruffalo there. You also have Willem Dafoe there. Matt Damon could sneak in. Dominic Sessa's there, but like maybe it's like Ruffalo and Melton, and I think that that's
exactly.
definitely
Yeah,
possible.
there is a chance that it does go bigger than we were expecting. It gets screenplay, supporting actress, and supporting actor. I don't think it ever gets picture, and I don't think Natalie Portman ever really happens.
Yeah, I mean, if anything, this is
Yeah,
like a Being the Ricardos type beat.
exactly,
It's
exactly.
significantly better film than that, but
But yeah,
yeah,
obviously. But my worry is I just think it might get squeezed out in the noise of award season. I don't know
yeah,
if people will be necessarily championing it as
which
the
would be
best,
disappointing
especially
because
as we've
it's a
got
great film, but
exactly. But we've got a lot of camp this year already, and I think there is
Barbie, Barbie,
maybe
yeah,
a camp limit in terms of the academy and what they'll go for. So
yeah.
yeah, I'm not entirely sure this will be a massive deal. I think it will get one of the things that we said though. I think it'll get one nomination at something, maybe two. But I don't believe it will go home empty handed in terms of noms. I think
Hopefully
that would
not.
be such a
Hopefully
shame,
not.
and I don't think it would.
But that's a conversation on Todd Haynes' May December good movie. And we got plenty more of these reviews coming out of festivals. Lots of great stuff. I saw Poor Things, very very good. I also saw my new favorite movie of the year, Something Beat Past Lives for Me, and we'll be talking about that. But until then, you can go follow us on social media if that's something that you're interested in addition to supporting the SAG strike in a link below. But until next time, thank you everybody for watching. Stay safe and goodbye.